Good evening and welcome to the Legion Cantina. In today's episode, I'm going to be running through and ranking all of the ranged heroes for Star Wars Legion. So, I've already done one of these for Force users, including Grievous and Special Forces. For the remaining heroes, I'm going to split them into two categories. So, I'm going to do ranged heroes, which is going to be today's video, and then support heroes. And then basically, I'm going to drop any heroes that don't quite fit into either category into support heroes as well. So, just ranged heroes today. We'll also not include bounty hunters because I've already covered bounty hunters in a previous video, which I will link in the description. But yeah, essentially, as I've done previously, just going to go through and rank all the ranged heroes. Just to run it through again, D tier is basically units that are very rarely good and will almost always make your army worse by taking them. C tier is units that could maybe be situationally fairly good, but on the whole will be below average and not particularly strong. B tier is just going to be units that are, average essentially. So they're normally either fairly good or either situationally they can be actually quite strong, but those situations maybe don't come up super often. A tier is going to be units that are nearly always good and will offer good value for their points, or situationally very, very strong and can win you a game. And then S tier is going to be units that can always have a positive impact on a game and situationally are almost like game-breakingly good. As sort of before, I'm also going to try and distribute them sort of fairly evenly as you kind of expect. So the fewest will be in D tier and S tier, and then the next most will be in C tier and A tier, and then the most should end up in B tier. So there are some units that arguably could be a bit further up, but I felt just to try and keep it sort of looking fairly uniform, needed to stay in the tiers that they're in. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. And starting off at the bottom of D tier, it's going to be Chewbacca. I'm going to be talking about him in the context of Gar and Rebels. I don't think there's a huge amount of difference. Both cases, I think he's D tier. Essentially, he is just extremely weak in both forms. Particularly in Rebels, where he doesn't get access to those surges. Obviously, he gets reliable 2 in Gar, which is a little bit nicer. Like, at least you get some surges on those saves. But the surge to crit is also nice from the Rebels as well. Like, there's sort of a balance between the two. And yeah, essentially he just isn't tough enough to merit being a unit in your army. You're paying 90 points for a unit that can fall over very quickly and not offer a lot, even if it isn't wounded. He does obviously have his enrage, which does mean that maybe that melee can sometimes pay off more than you might expect. 4 red with lethal 1 isn't anything to sniff at, but realistically, you're probably hitting for 3. If you're lucky enough to have an aim, then it's 3 pierce 1. Which against red saves does like 2 wounds on average. Like, it's just not, like, in no situation does it feel particularly strong. In Rebels, with that surge to crit, his bowcaster can do a little bit against vehicles, especially if you've got an aim token to kind of fish for those crits. Like, with an aim, you're probably good for like 3 pierce 1 against vehicles at range 3, which isn't terrible, but again, that just isn't really a compelling enough reason to run a unit, in my opinion. You do have access to Guardian, which isn't bad. And, if you want to, it gives you at least a bit of control over when you trigger that enrage, which is quite nice. That does at least mean that enrage maybe has a little bit more value than, for instance, with like Fifth Brother, for instance, who really struggles to kind of manage when that enrage is going to go off. Also, especially in Rebels, his command cards are kind of meh. In Gar, they are even more meh, although his synergy card with Yoda is quite fun. In Rebels, you're getting Common Cause, which gives that synergy with Luke Skywalker. This is okay, but it's a 1 pip that orders 2 units, but Chewbacca isn't going to have a huge amount of impact. And like, yes, Luke can have a little bit of impact, but then with Luke, you're already having to take one of his 1 pips in Son of Skywalker most of the time. So then taking this one as well, like, I suppose if you had no other 1 pip options other than like Ambush, maybe you would take this one, but essentially his command cards are made worse by the fact that you have to run Chewbacca in order to take them. Brains and Brawn with Leia, this one obviously does have synergy in Bright Tree, so in that situation this one can be quite good when you can put it on the ATST and add that, that double rainbow, which is pretty decent. With his regular gun, this is just very underwhelming, but thanks to that ATST having Incognito and Bright Tree, you can at least position quite well, and then you could always break that Incognito and use this to attack, which is pretty strong. And Notorious Scoundrels, this is okay. You can shuffle one of Han's command cards back in, which again isn't bad, but it's a 3 pip that orders 2 units, one of which in Chewbacca isn't just that compelling. So again, it just feels like a fairly underwhelming card. And Basically, Chewie just doesn't really offer much to a list, unfortunately, and in like he's not cheap enough to be a throwaway activation, but he doesn't impact the board enough to be worth spending points on. So it's just really fiddly, and especially in the Rebel operative slot and arguably the Gar operative slot, both of which are actually now fairly compelling. Yeah, it's just really tricky to fit him in. So in the Wookiee Battle Force, maybe alongside a Wookiee Commander, although, spoiler, that one I also don't think is great. So yeah, it's just very underwhelming from Chewie, and he just hasn't kept pace with sort of the way the game is played now, unfortunately, and is just far too vulnerable to be a unit that you include in your army. Moving up to the next unit in D tier, and it is going to be the Wookiee Chieftain. Much of the same problems as Chewie. He has a lower health pool. He does at least get guaranteed surges on his saves, but yeah, again, just not impacting the board enough to sort of justify existing. He is 100 points, so he's more than Chewie. At least he does come with charge baked in, and that agile isn't bad with the duelist. Like, if you're double moving into a force user and then you get immune pierce, okay. But then if they're hitting you for 4, you're probably still taking 3 wounds. Yes, you're immune pierce, which is nice, but yeah, it just feels a bit underwhelming. And again, 100 points before you're taking a command upgrade and maybe a training like a tenacity, for instance, as well. It just doesn't feel great. Couple that with the fact that you're only getting the sort of generic Wookiee command cards, which are like a slight upgrade most of the time over the generic ones, but again, just aren't that compelling, and definitely not compelling enough to sort of take. His bowcaster is statistically the same as Chewie's, just with a different dice distribution. So 4 black is the same as 2 red, 2 white. Yeah, again, same issues. The ancestral weapon isn't bad. Like, you don't get access to the pierce that Chewie does, but you're probably good for close to 4 hits with that surge hit, which isn't terrible, and you do get that charge baked in. But again, like, you're running in, hitting for 4, and then you've got 7 health, and they probably just kill you. Like, this you're more expensive than an arc unit, for instance. And yeah, you're just going to get ripped apart, unfortunately. I think basically every Wookiee unit is kind of D tier at the moment, and maybe they need a point to drop, maybe they need something cooler, like maybe this unit needs tactical one as well. Like, that would make that duelist a bit more valuable and a bit more interesting. That could spice things up a bit, but yeah, just yes, you have to take commanders, which at least maybe push this up a little bit because you're forced to take a commander, but there are so many better commander options in Gar alone, but also just in the wider game that, yeah, unfortunately, the Wookiee Chieftain will be relegated to D tier. Moving up to C tier, it's going to be Cassian Andor. Now, Cassian used to be one of the strongest units in the game in the previous edition. He was really good value, and he could really play that kind of sit-back sniper role that worked a bit better in the last edition really well. Unfortunately, he hasn't really moved across to this edition that well. He just doesn't have the kind of up-close objective playing potential that you want almost any unit to have realistically, but especially your heroes and operatives. So the main thing Cassian has to offer, especially early game, is his infiltrate and his sniper, which is infinite range, and with the sharpshooter one, generally you're probably good for 2 PS1. He can also be a pretty reasonable tank killer if you can get an aim or 2 to him, because then normally you're able to push just 2 crits straight through armor, which is really nice. I do wonder if he had surge to crit, but that would be quite nice, but then maybe you do almost push him a little bit too much towards that tank killing role, which you probably don't want him to have that much. Field Commander is obviously super useful. Generally, I mean, it's a bit tricky, right? I think it would almost be better if Cassian was still just a commander unit, because the commander unit is just commander slot's less competitive for rebels than the operative slot, so maybe that would give Cassian a better chance. But essentially, Cassian feels like how a lot of Empire units do. Like, he has pretty good firepower. He's able to do consistent damage at a pretty reasonable range, but that's not how you tend to win sort of games of Legion anymore, and you do just need that ability to push up and be that objective player. Now, you can do that with Cassian, especially in combination with his 1-pip, because he does have a pretty decent pistol to back that up. The problem is he doesn't have the survivability after that pistol turn to really present much of a threat. Even if you get his Danger Sense 3 fired all the way up, it's still on average only the same as like having a dodge and nimble. And if you had a 6 health unit with nimble, you wouldn't really describe that as something that was good at playing objectives. So he doesn't really have that kind of strength to his game, unfortunately. In combination with K2, especially with K2 getting that teamwork Cassian, you can pull off some nice shenanigans there, especially with K2's calculate odds. We'll talk about K2 in a second. But yeah, I just think Cassian just hasn't quite moved across to this game super well, and at 90 points he does just feel too expensive. If he came down towards like 75, for instance, that would make him a lot more compelling, but unfortunately the Rebel Operative slot is just so competitive now that you need a really compelling reason to run a unit in that Operative slot, and Cassian just doesn't really have that in this version of the game. He does have something to offer, he is different to the other operatives, but currently that's just not needed in Rebels and in this form of the game. To look at his command cards, his 1-pip's pretty good, so this is crack shots, so essentially you'll get an aim token at the start of the turn, and then normally you'll do move, and then a shoot as well, and with his marksman and generally with his pistol, he'll probably be pushing like 5 or 6 PS2, which is pretty decent, not insane, like that's basically comparable to, you know, a typical turn from hand, for instance, but you know, at least you do get those extra aims and that consistency, and you know, you can, as I said before, you could shoot at a tank with this, for instance, then you pretty reliably push 3 crits through armor if you wanted to do that. So he has something to offer, and obviously this had to get changed because standbys are really bad, so I kind of see why this change has been made. His 2-pip's a bit more situational. You're basically relying on a unit being sort of quite heavily wounded but not dead. You can do some, like there's a combo for instance with Chewie with this, who's pretty reliably going to be a bit damaged, and then you can give him and Han a bunch of tokens, which is quite a nice combo. You can also do this with Leia and Wicket if you're feeling particularly brave, although generally Wicket will probably be the one who's wounded, so then it's quite tricky to put an order on him unless you're then taking Underworld connections on Cassian, so all a bit fiddly in that regard. Can also go on Ahsoka, for instance. Like, she can actually cling on fairly well at fairly low health, and giving her a bunch of dodges and maybe an aim as well could be really useful. So a situational 2-pip, you're probably taking this over push most of the time, but it's definitely not an auto take, and if you have other compelling 2-pips, then definitely slot those in on top of this one. Volunteer Mission, his 3-pip, used to be one of the main reasons to run him. I used to run in the old version of the game the kind of double saber Cassian. We had Cassian as your commander, and then Ahsoka and Op Luke as your force users. It was super fun. Getting free recovers on those units was really nice. You could, you know, even take offensive push on Luke, for instance, get, you know, that aim token on him, and then when you get that recover, you get another aim token. Like, that was actually surprisingly good on his dice pool. So there are combos you can pull off with this. Unfortunately, recovers aren't quite as good in this form of the game at the moment, and also it doesn't help that, again, Cassian isn't super competitive, so maybe we're not seeing this as much, but this is a takeover assault. It is a really decent command card and can offer your army quite a lot. So if you are running Cassian, bring this along, and you can, you know, shape a few things around this, like take some offensive pushes, maybe even on Leia, for instance, to get that recover, because then she can exemplar that aim, so it could be useful wherever you need it. Like, there are little combos you can pull off. So not a dreadful set of command cards, just again not compelling enough to get past the deficiencies of Cassian as a unit. Moving up to the next unit in the tier list, it's going to be K2SO. I think this is a bit harsh on K2, just because I think he is the better of the two out of him and Cassian, but I think you can't really separate K2 that much from Cassian in terms of his ranking, because you have to take Cassian for him to come along. So maybe I should just be ranking these as a pair, but then you don't have to take K2 with Cassian, so that gets a bit complicated. But essentially, I think K2 is better than Cassian, but I think as you have to bring Cassian, he's not that much higher rated. But yeah, K2 just has a lot to offer. He has red saves, he has armor 1, which is always nice in Rebels. It's not that tough, but it's tough enough that, you know, it might just slow down. If an opponent has a decent melee threat, it might, like, red dice can always do a little bit of a high roll. Like, there is the option there, the opportunity maybe for him to high roll a little bit. So he might just survive a bit longer than perhaps some of your other units in Rebels. Calculate odds is really nice. He can obviously do it on himself, and then you generate 4 tokens from one action, which is really nice. Other options are to hit exemplar units, so Leia, Rebel Officer, whatever, that could be really nice. Or, you know, if you're running Han and Chewie, aims and dodges aren't amazing on those two, but at least a bit more survivability and maybe a bit more consistency on the damage is always nice. Couple that with Incognito and Infiltrate, and he can actually get some really decent action economy. Like, it's very common for K2 to maybe drop early, do a calculate odds, and then sort of push up towards an objective. And as long as you use that incognito correctly and break it at the right time, it can actually be really difficult to handle K2. Just because he does have that bit more survivability, and you like, there's no, especially if he's on a flank or is able to like avoid some of your opponent's bigger threats. Dealing with that armor 1 and that 5 red health can be a bit too much for some units, and you might just clog up, some of your opponent's flanking units, which could be really nice. Generally, it is worth bringing the pistol. Obviously, if you're bringing Jhin, it's definitely worth bringing the pistol. But yeah, just you're probably realistically only going to get to shoot once or twice. But if you're able to get at least an aim on him, or maybe two, like he should push 3 or 4 PS1, and that's really nice. It can do some really decent damage. You can obviously take like transponder as well for an extra aim or whatever. Like on those combo turns, it can be really useful. He's also a pretty decent tank killer. That surge to crit goes a long way, and it's that Bosk dice pool, right? Of like, actually, the majority of your faces then become crits, so you're more likely to pull crits than you are regular hits, which can be super nice. But yeah, he's a fairly sort of straightforward unit. You just have to play him a little bit carefully in the early game, push him up, and then he should, as long as you get him on the right objectives, be really effective at scoring them. So yeah, I think he's better. As I say, he's better than Cassian, but I think I have to kind of rate them fairly similarly because they come as a pair. He does have access to a command card. It's a 3-pip that orders himself and Cassian and just gives him Guardian 4, and you can select another hero that can't have ranged attacks made against it. So this is situationally fairly good. I think there was a combo that people tried where you like played this on maybe like turn 2 or turn 3, and you just used him as like a damage sponge for all the stuff around him, and then you had cheap prepare to kind of fix him back up, which I think is an interesting concept. I've never tried it. I imagine it's quite a difficult thing to line up, and you probably have to be quite good at the game to pull that off, but I can see it. And yeah, I think you wouldn't take this over Assault generally. I think this is like below Assault in terms, if I was doing a tier list, which I'm not going to, then I think it would come below Assault. But I could see situations, and if you built your list very carefully, where this could be fairly strong. But yeah, I'm personally not a believer in Sacrifice. Moving up to the next unit in C tier, and I'm a bit conflicted about this one because I'm not completely sure this is fair, but I'm going to be putting Gar Saxon at the top of C tier. I think unfortunately for Gar, he's a little bit confused and maybe a little bit expensive. He's sort of an up-close unit because of his pistols and because he's a Mandalorian, and they just tend to excel at those kind of closer range battles. And his pistol's pretty decent. Like, he's normally pushing, what's that, probably close to 3? Yeah, 2.5 PS1 probably with Surge to Crit, which isn't bad. Sharpshooter 1 we love. But then his upgrades, like, you're probably taking the flamethrower. I think that's a given. It's, as with other flamethrowers, like, really strong. And that black and the white with the Surge to Crit is also really nice to have. But then his rifle coming in at 15 points just feels a bit bad. Like, you're then pushing, like, he's going to be close to 120 points full kit, which is a lot of points. Like, that's starting to get to like cheap Force user territory, and he just doesn't quite hold up as well as those other units. He's not awful, and I quite like his command cards in conjunction with especially the sort of the super commandos. Like, that feels like a really decent combo. Compel is also great. Like, there's combos there with the pikes where you can start to fire up that danger sense, and then you can still get your maximum number of actions off using that compel, so that's quite a nice thing to have. Aside from that, he's obviously just a Mandalorian, impervious, red surging saves, jump 2, like, all this stuff is decent, but yeah, he's just probably a little bit overcosted. Like, the fact that full kit, he's probably coming in a very similar cost to Sabine, and personally, I would nearly always take Sabine over Gar Saxon because of the Darksaber, because of Nimble, because of access to like explosions, for instance, and also that Gunslinger with her just not better pistols. Obviously, her pistol is worse, but being able to shoot twice is better. So, yeah, he just does lose out, although obviously comparing him to Sabine is maybe a bit harsh because she's a pretty strong hero. The other problem is his melee profile is pretty underwhelming. Like, I feel like he deserves better. Like, he does. I think he does have the Darksaber. Can't remember if he wields the Darksaber in the show. That's probably revealing my lack of Star Wars knowledge, but I feel like he does need something cooler in melee than just 2 red. Like, he looks like he would throw more than 2 red in melee. Maybe just make his pistols hit in melee. That would be quite cool. Maybe a bit OP, but he needs it. I think he could come down to like 85 points, and I think that would be okay. Maybe he then starts to become a little bit too cheap, but you know what? It's Shadow Collective. Give him something. Like, I don't think this is going to break the meta or anything. So, yeah, it is just the problem with Shadow Collective at the moment. They just seem to have pretty naff commanders. Like, Maul's too expensive. I suppose the Capo is okay, but yeah, not the most compelling set of commanders in the world. His command cards marked for elimination. You pick an enemy unit, you get some aim tokens, and you get observation, suppressions, all this stuff. Like, it's fine. You'd run this over ambush, and it'll put in a bit of work. You run this with the sniper most of the time, I would imagine, but yeah, meh, it's fine. Fight Another Day. A 2-pip that orders 3 units is nice. Giving out a bunch of dodges is nice, and outmaneuvers also great. Bearing in mind the units ordered by this will also, I mean, they're going to be super commandos realistically. They'll probably also get dodge, an extra dodge from their defend 1. So 2 dodges, outmaneuver. They're going to be really tough. Just a really nice 2-pip for that synergy when you're sort of bunched up, maybe on that like turn 2, turn 3 before you start to dive onto objectives. Victory or Deaths, same deal. It gives out 3 aims, and gaining Indomitable is just really useful. So yeah, you know, those Supermandos that get ordered will have a dodge and an aim, which is a nice combo. The other units that don't get ordered will still get their aims from independent aims. So again, decent combo there. But yeah, he's just a little bit expensive. Like, I think his design is fine. I think his command cards are fairly cool, but he just needs a little bit more spice on top to be sort of quite as deadly as I feel he deserves to be. Moving up to the bottom of B tier, and we are going to be talking about Iden Versio. Yeah, she's fine. She's expensive, but she's not insanely expensive. She just, yeah, she's fairly straightforward. I feel like these ranged heroes are quite sort of easy to access because they kind of do what they say on the tin. Most of them will have either a cool long range option or will be more based on that kind of mid range, kind of skirmishing melee type stuff. And Iden can do both fairly well. You know, she's got her long range sniper with that high velocity and pierce. No cumbersome is so good on this sniper. If Cassian didn't have cumbersome on his sniper, he would be so much better. But yeah, she's got that sharpshooter 1, she's got nimble, she's got quick thinking. You know, you can infiltrate, quick thinking, have a shot, then you got it on the marksman as well with that inbuilt pierce. It's all great. Yeah, she's just going to be very consistent. She is expensive. I think she could come down towards like 105 or even 100, and I think it would probably still be okay. The Tac Strike nerf just felt a bit unnecessary. It used to order 1 extra unit for anyone who's not familiar. We'll talk about command cards more in a second, but that just felt unnecessary. I'd be perfectly happy for it to go back as it was and, you know, give Empire that big alpha strike turn that they really need when you're running that gun line. That combo with deaths can be super nice. And, you know, even scouts, you know, we got that scout 3 into the move, into the shoot. Like, it's not a bad turn 1. Obviously, if your opponent throws themselves out that far, they deserve to be kind of punched a bit for that attack. But yeah, it's okay. Yeah, also, thing to note here, her droid is another 15 points on top, and then she's 130, which, as I've said before, with like with Gar Saxon, for instance, does start to nudge them towards like the bottom end of the kind of cheap force users and things like that, and doesn't feel great. Yeah, she could just need to be that bit cheaper, or make the droid cheaper. You know, bring it down to, if she came down to like 105, the droid came down to 10 maybe or something, that would probably feel a bit better. Talks about infiltrate, and obviously she gets the synergy with ISF where they get the entourage or whatever it's called, retinue, sorry, to get that, you know, that free aim, which is really nice, especially how much they love an aim. So yeah, she does what she says on the tin. She's pretty decent. Her command cards aren't bad at all. Her pulse scan, just firing up that marksman, is always great. And she already has sharpshooter 1, so getting sharpshooter 2, especially the way cover is now, probably not that impactful. But yeah, probably not that impactful, but not bad at all. And then also, you know, gives her a dodge and that standby, which are both decent. Like, she has nimble, which is nice. The standby, less impactful than it used to be, but you're always going to be grateful to have access to it. Concussive Blast, I personally wouldn't bother with this one. Like, yes, you get a decent weapon in the grenade launcher, but you're spending a whole command card for this for 5 red surge to hit, which is probably hitting for, I think that's just over 4, which probably does like 2 wounds. Yeah, it doesn't really feel worth it for me, so I'd probably go for there are spicier 2-pips in Empire. Even the generic 2-pip they can take. Can't remember what it's called, the one that orders supports and heavies and shuffles it back, but yeah, that's what I'd take over this. Incapacitate. This one, however, can be really nice, and it's a shame it's a 2-pip in a way, because if this was a 1-pip or something and you were coming up against, B2s, or if you're running into like the mega squads from your 6-act Gar list or something, shuffling one of their core tokens basically face down, removing their activation, feels super powerful. So if you're running the droid, probably worth taking this one in, just because situationally it can be very strong. And with the way that command cards play now, you generally have like 1 or 2 that you can afford to make kind of a bit more tech choices than kind of traditionally very strong command cards. So this one could work really well. And then Tac Strike, which I've talked about a bunch already. Steady, tactical, really nice. Can be a turn 1 play, probably better as a turn 2 play, but early game, absolutely fantastic. We love aims, love steady, gives you so many options, and feels really good. Like firing up Special Forces units, be that your Inferno squad, be that Deaths, be that Scouts, all really good options, and should work really well. So yeah, a positive reason to run Iden in her command cards. 1-pip's fairly good, 2-pips are 1 situational, 1 not great, and then 3-pip tactical strike is super nice. And the next unit we're going to be looking at is going to be Captain Rex, and it's really tricky to know how to rate Rex, because do you rate him in terms of just like his utility? Because he's a really useful utility piece for most Gar lists, like that could be super strong. Or do you rate him for just like the power of the unit himself, in which case I think he's probably a bit lower. Essentially, the big utility he brings to a list is that scouting party 2 and the ability to get scout 2 if you take recon intel. And the fact that can, if you're running, big clone squads, Bad Batch, Anakin, whatever, that's sort of 2 lots of scout 2 can be huge. Like, it's difficult to put a points value on it, but I'd say probably at least worth like 20 points, maybe getting those scouts off, maybe a bit more. And that's where a lot of Rex's value come from, is that early game utility. Also, he can, share those tokens a bit like an Arc squad with Tactical 1, and that also can work really well. If you've got ARFs, or if you're firing up like a 5 squad that's just taking a range 3 shot, like things like that can go quite a long way. So I think Rex himself is not super powerful, because he is again in that sort of slightly awkward spot of he wants to be up close, but he doesn't want to be that close because his melee's not great. His blasters are pretty good. Like, you're normally, if you're getting the gunslinger off, you're normally good for 5 with probably a couple of crits dropped in there, which is really nice, like good consistent damage. And if you want to use those aimed with tactical, you should then push 6. But that's not really like that compelling in terms of damage, and it doesn't have, for instance, the pierce that hands blasters, for instance, give him in terms of that consistency, and making sure that especially against red safe you're actually getting some good damage off. But yeah, he's then stuck quite close with 5 health, no surges, no impervious, and yes, you can probably share a surge or 2 from surrounding clone squads, but your surges are really valuable in those lists, and they can run out fairly quickly if you're having to make a lot of saves. And do you want to spend them on Rex? You probably would if you did pull a surge, but again, if you're coming up against something with Pierce, like, most Force users, maybe not in 1 turn, but definitely like in 2 turns, they will absolutely blast through Rex and be able to go and do something else. And I just feel like if him and Cody had access to Impervious, they would have maybe that bit more solidity that would actually just merit them being, like, I suppose at least the advantage Cody has, he can sit further back, whereas Rex really does want to push up, and that inherently drags him into these spots where he can be attacked by units with access to Pierce and pretty big dice pools, and that does just make him feel very vulnerable. In terms of his command cards, they're okay. Call Me Captain is probably the best of them, just because in the situations where it's good, it is really strong. Like, if you can get him, generally the strategy seems to be, if you can get him trapped in melee with like a fairly weak unit with good line of sight all around him, you can then just buff up loads of melee attacks, because this also works in melee. as in when your opponent's using a melee attack. And like, for instance, if you can get Anakin within 2 in LOS, then you're throwing like 8 red with Anakin with that PS3. Like, that's really nice. Or if you're enhancing like an ARC squad or a 5 squad with charge, like all these things are super nice. So that does seem to be the strategy. It's often the case that the strategy for this, the moment for this to be played doesn't come up, and then it's just sitting in your hand. But I think that's okay. I think, especially with how many people are definitely playing Standing Orders turn 1 and sometimes playing Standing Orders turn 2 as well, you generally actually have space for like 1 or 2 utility picks, kind of like, that just might not come up that often, but just in the situations where they're good, you could be like, oh, I'm really grateful I brought this. So this is one of those cards, I think, and not going to be played in every game, but in the games you play, it will feel pretty good. Take that, Clankers. It's underwhelming. It does at least order 2 trooper units, which is nice. There's a bit of flexibility there, but you probably take push over this most of the time. As well, if you're bringing vehicles, you'd probably take push. If you're not bringing vehicles, you probably bring this. Although there is the risk that Rex dies, then you can't play it. So then maybe you do just take push. But yeah, it's not that compelling, unfortunately, this one. And even in the situations where it's inverted commas good, I don't think it has that much upside. We're Not Programmed. It's a 3-pip that does at least order 4 clone troopers. That's not bad. Again, very list dependent as to whether or not you can have space for this. Like, if you know you're going to need to be ordering Anakin, for instance, then you probably can't bring this, because you do want that order control on Anakin. But, you know, if you're just doing like a Bad Batch thing, for instance, then you probably can get away with playing this. Yeah, I mean, it's nice for just a bit of extra order control, and if you got like a 5 coordinate, you could maybe get like 5 orders off this, which feels pretty good. So don't hate this. The recover action doesn't feel that impactful. Like, I don't think you're ever bringing like offensive push or anything on Rex when you have such good aim generation anyway. So yeah, this is, I'd say, roughly as good as Assault and quite list dependent as to whether or not you need to bring it along. In B tier is going to be Major Marquand. Now, he is a Tempest Force only addition, but I figured, you know, he's a ranged hero. He technically fits the definition, so I'll take this opportunity to talk about him. Essentially, Marquand is just an ATST with everything equipped. So, well, aside from the mortar, unfortunately. But you've got your grenade launcher, your twin light blaster, and then the sort of extra twin blaster as well. And yeah, I think he's a bit expensive, weirdly, for a tricked out ATST. I'm not sure why he gets a premium over the basic one, which I think, if you took the Hammers pilot, would come to around 170 points. So I feel like Marquand could maybe, as with a lot of things in Empire, do with a little points drop. But he's fairly solid. Direct vehicle is great in Tempest. Like, you're going to be running probably at least one, I imagine. I don't actually know if you have to take 2 ATSTs in Tempest to fill out the points, but if you're running Tempest, you're going to be running some ATSTs, so this feels like a pretty sensible thing to have. Obviously, you'll have Field Commander, which is, again, really useful. His command cards and the Tempest command cards do combine together quite well to kind of make more vehicle-focused list work. And I think it's really good that Tempest exists. Whether or not it's fun to play with or anything like that, I've played against it a couple of times, and it's not like the most fun experience to play into, but I like that there is this kind of angle for people who are into the more vehicle-centered side of things to play, because that's something, like, it's a game that should include those kind of options, in my opinion, and it's really cool that exists. Yeah, he's just a really nice vehicle synergy piece, and we'll talk about its command cards and stuff in a second, but it does what it says on the tin here, I think, pretty well, and I think it's sensible that this doesn't exist in normal Empire. I don't think there'll be any like huge exploits you could pull off, but I think it just being focused on Tempest Force does make it easier to balance, and it's kind of more thematic in a way. So his 1-pip, Gunner Infantry, he gets Tactical 1, and then he reduces maximum speed by 1 to a minimum of 1. So he can just do a big suppressive, like, split fire thing, essentially, is probably going to be what he does here, and getting that free aim token is super nice. Yeah, and bearing in mind, you'll also probably get another order on a different ATST as well with his direct. Like, if this feels absolutely fine, and I think it's what you would want a 1-pip on a vehicle focus list to do. Maybe it could be slightly cooler, maybe he could get steady or something, but I think it's okay. And especially, like, that difference between speed 1 and speed 2 on the size of the ATST space just doesn't matter that much, because again, a very small proportion of the actual distance you move is made up of the movement stick. So I think this is absolutely fine. Next one is going to be Squadron on Me. Same card art as Assault, I believe, which is a bit disappointing. They couldn't be bothered to find anything else. This is probably the weakest of his command cards. You maybe take the generic Empire 2-pip over this. But yeah, free pivot and speed 1 move is just a nice utility. Gets your vehicles where they need to be, and especially if you're playing on, I don't know, a Recover the Research or a Shifting or something where you really need to get somewhere quite quickly, this could be quite useful. So yeah, don't hate it, and it is a shame that it only orders him, but again, remember with that direct, you're probably getting an additional order as well, so that feels fairly good. Armored Cavalry is probably the fiddliest of them. I think if you're in both of the arcs, you get to choose which effect you want, which I think feels pretty good. If you're in the front arc, you get a dodge, so that's obviously if you're a bit more aggressive. If you're in the side arc, you're going to get an aim, and if you're in the rear arc, you're going to get a move. I think most of the time you are looking for those aims. That would feel pretty good, and I think this is probably an early game play. Not turn 1, but turn 2. I think this would be perfect. Like, especially if you've got ATSTs with linked targeting. This then gives them 2 aims, which on that dice pool could be really nice to have. So that would just be a decent buff, I think. And again, if you're running Tempest, it's almost certain that you are bringing this, because while you don't want to wait too long in the game to players, because then you might not have 3 vehicles to hit, if you get this off on turn 2, this feels really good and just gives you that bit more consistency and firepower with your ATSTs. So yeah, Mark 1's really solid. Exactly, I think he feels perfect for B tier and fitting in with kind of these other B tier units really well. Tempest itself is not super competitive, but I think he could maybe do with a slight points drop, but beyond that, I think he's pretty well balanced, and I like the effects he has and the command cards they gave him. So yeah, it feels really good, and not that I particularly enjoy playing against or with this, but it's good that if people want to play this, they can. So moving over to Commander Cody, and yeah, he's just a really nice, consistent unit with some great vehicle synergy. He can sit further back, give the you can run the ATRT with the sort of command and control uplink, which is really nice to give you that coordinate, and then it just really increases your consistency and gives you, like, there's real value in having that target 1, having that aim ready to go, because you can either use it on Cody's blaster, so get that PS1 or those rerolls, or you can share it with another unit if you've got ARFs kicking around, for instance, or if you've maybe pushed another unit slightly further forward, say a 5 squad, that you can then use that aim to enhance their firepower as well. So feels really decent, and yeah, having tokens at the start of the turn is really powerful, especially with that those 2 orders that you can potentially get with the direct vehicle and the coordinate combo. Take cover doesn't make any sense, I don't think. Like, you have so few actions as clones, don't waste them on gaining a dodge, and then don't waste 8 points, or is it 6 points? 6 points on the possibility of gaining 2 dodges. I think it's a waste of time, so don't bother. His command cards are solid. Talk about them more in a minute, but yeah, I think he's fine and very vehicle centered, which feels appropriate, very thematic, which I really like. His Observe 2, I continue to have this sort of slight issue with the way Observe is generally put together, because they keep giving it to units that want to be shooting at range 4, and it's a range 3 ability. Maybe it would be too strong if it was range 4. It probably would be too strong if it was range 4, but you don't, unless somebody's pushing into you, in which case, great. You don't want to be moving into them, really, because one of the advantages of Cody is he can take the fights he wants to at long range, and with an aim, he's generally good for either 3 PS1 or probably 4 with a couple of crits. Like, you want to be taking those long range fights, so unless somebody's coming to you, you don't get that observed value. But there are situations with, like, command cards, for instance, where it can be worth pushing up that a little bit further to get those observes and those extra tokens off. Same problem as Rex. No impervious, no surges. You can get crippled pretty quickly, and it feels bad. Like, I would like to see these 2 at least gain impervious. Personally, I think it just, I don't think you can give them generic surges, because then they basically just become Mandos, but not quite. So yeah, maybe just impervious would be good on both of these guys, just to increase their survivability that bit, because currently they're just very easy prey for a Force user. Like, you just can't stand up to them, really. Like, most Force users are generally good for either 5 PS3, in which case you're probably dying, or 6 PS2, in which case you're probably dying. Like, there's just not a lot you can do about it. Without vehicles, I wouldn't really bother personally. I think you're just running Cody for that vehicle synergy, and that feels really good. So yeah, that's how I'd fit Cody in. His 1 pip is nice, like getting 4 lots of observe off is good. Like that's basically 2 aims, and I think, although you can't use them for lethal, I think observes are slightly better because you can use them 1 by 1, and then you can always just increase your dice pool a little bit. Like sometimes you'll be forced to spend an aim on the 1 black dice, for instance, and then with 2 observes you get 2 shots at that 1 black dice rather than having to burn an aim to just get 1. So I think they are a little bit better. Copy that with the fact you can get, the extra bit of suppressive or impact if you're focusing down a vehicle or trying to, stop a unit from gaining its full actions. Feels really good. Have I Let You Down is a bit fiddly. Basically, if a person near you gets wounded with a face-up order token, you can attack them back. You need line of sight, and yeah, it's just... There are times when this does work. I think especially in the late game, when there are maybe weaker attacks coming through, it can sometimes be enough of a deterrent to stop somebody attacking you, which maybe lets you hold on to a point. So that sometimes can work. But yeah, I think this is another one where it's just not that compelling, and definitely can be one that you sometimes can leave at home. And finally, combined arms. 4 orders is really decent. It's a bit tricky sometimes to have enough stuff to put the orders on, but generally you can make this work. Worth noting that if you're also running, an additional unit that maybe has coordinate, you can get 6 orders just off this 1 card, and that's pretty decent for order control. Combine that with the ability to make a couple of B1 moves, and it's pretty good. I think this isn't an insane 3-pip, but we love order control, and a few extra effects on top of those 4 orders, as long as you can get them off, is pretty good. So yeah, he's very vehicle focused, feels themey, feels good. Just don't throw him up too close, and you should be absolutely fine. Moving up to the final unit in B tier, it's going to be Han Solo. I really deliberated with Han. He was briefly in A tier, and then I kind of dragged him back down into B tier. I think Han is just slightly too expensive for how survivable he is, and if used correctly in the right hands, a bit like with Luke, for instance, Op Luke, I think he can absolutely be an A tier unit. He has enough output to be an A tier unit. But I think in the hands of the average player, he's probably a B tier unit, because there are going to be times when you mess up his positioning and he gets jumped and he's got 6 health with white surging saves. And yes, his Uncanny Luck 3 can sometimes be really clutch, but it can also sometimes do nothing. And then it feels really bad because your 100-point unit can just get jumped and killed so easily. The potential for 4PS4 with steady should not be ignored, and I'm not ignoring it. That dice pool should absolutely normally hit for 2, and it feels really bad if you miss on one of them, because then you can do that weird situation where you're doing 1 PS2, which feels really weird, and then if you're rolling into Impervious, they technically roll 3 dice for 1 damage. But yeah, he feels decent, and he's just... I love the way this unit is constructed. It just feels right. His Gunslinger is perfect, low profile, feels good. Sharpshooter 1, fine. Yeah, its cover isn't a huge deal these days, especially on Surge to Crit small dice pools, but it just gives you that bit more consistency maybe. Steady's great, obviously, and Uncanny Luck 3. Yeah, he's generally pushing like 110 to 115, which... yeah, it's just a little bit expensive, but it's okay. And again, as I'm saying, in the right hands, he can feel really strong, but I think for most people, he's just a little bit fiddly to pull off correctly, and you really have to think about how you're going to use that steady. The classic combo is that kind of like last first thing where on, say, turn 2 or turn 3, you want to hold Han as long as you can, and then you go straight into the 0-pip. So you go last with Han, get your 4PS4 off, and then you are out in the open. So you've taken a risk basically, but then you can use your 0-pip to have a shot and then dive back behind cover, and then you've basically got, hopefully, it's realistically going to be 7 PS8, but that's still really good. And yeah, on that turn, as long as you're taking your up close and personal and stuff, he'll then have 3 dodges with his Uncanny Luck. He should be okay to survive the turn. Yeah, only 0-pip in the game. It's game breaking. It fundamentally changes the way you play the game. I'm not sure on the interaction with command and control uplink, Krennic's Cunning, and a 1-pip. I don't know who would go first then. Apart from that, I think you nearly always go first as Han, and apart from that very specific combination, having the ability to guarantee going first is a really big deal. So really enjoy that. An aim and a dodge is also super fun. Yeah, just not amazing on hand, but at least it gives him that bit of consistency and should hopefully allow you to guarantee that 4 PS4. And then hopefully you're running up to 3 dodges, which is really nice. If you are running Chewy, that token synergy also feels really good. His 2-pip is great in Brightree. Apart from that, I don't quite see the point as much, but if you've got a squad of, say, like mega skirmishers or mega slingers, just whack an order on them, force your opponent to shoot them, watch them get no value at all, and then you've kind of nullified them for a turn, which feels great, and just keep hand tucked behind the corner where he can't be shot, and that feels really good. So yeah, 2-pip, very situational, but in those situations, feels really good. And change of plans, people know it's coming, people will sort of play around it, but yeah, it's okay. And, worst case scenario, it's just a slightly worse version of Assault, which is also fine. And you can do the shuffle shenanigans with Chewie's command cards as well and mess with people. So, yeah, feels decent. And if you're bringing Han, you're probably at least bringing his 0 and his 3. And then your 2-pip's kind of a situational choice. In Brightree, probably. In a normal Rebel list, maybe. But, yeah, very list dependent. And that is B tier sorted. Moving up into A tier, we're going to be looking at Sabine Wren. Sabine is just really good value now. You're taking the Darksaber with her. You're probably taking like prepared supplies. I tend to take a prepared supplies, and then one of up close and personal or strike team leader if you're running the clan run stuff. And then she's probably coming in around 120 to 125 points. And she's going to be tough. She's going to have dodges. She's going to have decent damage output. And she's going to be immune to melee pierce, which means Force users absolutely hate her. Yeah, she's great. And she will dig you out of holes that you're not expecting to be in. I have the really unfortunate habit of just being like, oh, I've got 2 speed 3 moves. Let's go forward. And then she gets like unexpectedly jumped by a bunch of my opponent's stuff, and she'll sometimes just emerge like absolutely fine, because if those red surging saves are like close to average or maybe even slightly above average, it can just be like crushing for your opponent. And the only way Pierce can get to her, and even then you're like impervious, not even like you have a degree of anti-Pierce stuff, is if they're shooting her at range. If you're hitting you in melee, bring the Darksaber, you're going to negate that, and then you can have those sort of nimble dodges ready to go. Kind of what I talked about with the Beskar duelist for the Mando resistance, like just feels really strong, and negating melee pierce, especially on units that rely on that. Vader, Anakin, and most Force users, to be honest, can feel really good. So she's great, and we'll be able to just frustrate Force users for kind of a budget cost, a bit like Luke in that regard, except she's a bit faster and a bit tougher, so you can put in work. Her pistols are solid. I wouldn't run her for damage. As I've said here, you're probably good for 4 PS2, which is fine. She's okay against tanks. Like, you have to rely a bit on Rolling Hot, but her dice pool's normally good for a crit in a bit, which isn't bad. So if you want 1 PS1 against a tank in a pinch, then it's absolutely fine. Yeah, I really like her synergy card with the Ahsoka. I've talked about it a bunch before, so I don't think I need to run it through again. But for that dive turn, either on like a turn 2 or even late game, if you really need to shoot around the board, I think it can be absolutely great. Her clan cards, the only one of these I would really bother with is explosions most of the time. I never used to run explosions. I was always like, oh, nobody really bunches up that much anymore. But if you have a speed 3 move, and also if you can predict the turn before that you're going to need to do this, it can be surprisingly good, because Sabine's threat range is huge. This goes on a 1-pip, and you can just chuck it forward and see what it does, put in some work against. If an opponent's, like for instance on an intercept signals, if your opponent's really picked one flank, you can normally deal out a bunch of suppression, not that much damage, but a bunch of suppression, which can really slow people down, which is super nice. So yeah, if you're running Sabine, unless you really, really need to squeeze in some other 1-pips, bring this, it'll put in work and do absolutely fine. Similar Rebellion, this one's really bad. It's a 2-pip that only orders her, and then it basically gives you a graffiti token that makes your opponent's rally step one worse, and your rally step 1 better if you can see the token. It just doesn't feel great, and the game, maybe if the game went really long, like if you had an extra turn or 2, it might start to pay off, but yeah, this doesn't feel worth it, so leave this one at home. Legacy of Mandalore, if you're running Special Forces operatives and commanders and you don't have a great 3-pip option, then this is okay. At least give her Inspire too, and I'd like a few more tokens from this as well. The fact they're all on Sabine, who's also fairly good at generating tokens anyway, just doesn't feel great. So this one isn't phenomenal. Do you take this over Assault? Maybe, but personally I'd leave it at home and just take the flexibility of Assault over, the extra few tokens. But maybe if you really want to make sure Sabine survives that one turn, then you can go for this. Card art is amazing though. That is a compelling reason to run this. And moving up to the next unit in A tier, it's going to be Sun Fac. He's just so bloody cheap. Like, you are spending 55 points on a guy who can get a free jump 3 into then 2 other speed 2 moves. Like, he can absolutely fly across the board. Whatever. He can absolutely fly across the board when he needs to. Yeah, combo that with his direct Genosian warriors. Just stick him on a flank with some Geos. And, if you find some LOS blocking, you can just bully whatever your opponent sticks on that flank, and it's fairly straightforward. He gets cover 1 as well, which is nice. So if you can find some light cover, you then immediately heavy cover, and sometimes that'll really save you, and sometimes it'll do nothing. His retinue Poggle is okay. Generally, they probably won't be that close because Poggle might struggle a little bit to keep up with him, and also Poggle isn't that great, so maybe you could leave that at home. But yeah, it's not bad, and if you are running them, at least it feels quite thematic. Scale and weighed down. Weighed down does at least mean if you're carrying those objectives, you kind of lose a bit of your maneuverability, but still feels pretty decent. Yeah, he's just cheap at 55 points. Like, this is just a great package to have at 55 points, and he isn't he isn't insanely tough, but he's tough enough to survive against other units that are generally going to be stuck on a flank. And his damage isn't terrible. He's generally good for 2 Pierce 1 in melee, and his suppressive carbine, that suppressive is really nice. Imagine if he's up against a basic core unit on a flank, he'll be able to really bully them, give them that suppression, deal a little bit of damage, and just take away those actions from them, which feels really good. So yeah, you just have to play him correctly. Don't throw him in too aggressively. Let him take those fights against, he wants to be punching down, basically. He doesn't want to, come up against those big threats, because those are actually the units that will crush him in one turn. But if you can avoid those and take advantage of that cover 1 and the ability to, jump out, shoot, and then jump back, you can do some really good work. So yeah, he's just really solid and really good value. His 1-pip is really decent as well. So you can, you've got your direct baked into your unit card, and then you can just pick 2 allied Geonosian warriors and make them jump even further. Gives you even more maneuverability than you already had, and then couple that with the fact that Sun Fac can get that agile and demoralize 1. Gives the ability to knock off a standby for whatever reason your opponent's ended up with a standby, and then you're going to have 3 dodges from your agile because you're probably going to triple move off the back of this card. So if you really need to go somewhere quickly and grab an objective, this is absolutely the card for you and feels really good. So again, if you've got really compelling 1-pips, then maybe this one doesn't quite make the cut, but the fact this gives you just so much kind of maneuverability and effectiveness early in the turn feels really good. So generally worth trying to squeeze in. And we are into S tier, and again, there was only really ever going to be 1 unit in here, and you can probably guess what it's going to be. It's Bad Batch. They are probably the best unit in the game right now. Yeah. Everything you could want a unit to do in this game, this unit does. It's really tough. It has excellent action economy, excellent action economy. It has steady. It has tactical. It has surging red saves. It has impervious. Yeah, it's just really, really strong. And I don't know, I don't want to fundamentally change the way the unit is built. I'm not asking for that at all. But I think they are just too strong right now. And I think they're not particularly engaging to play with or against. There is some skill in how to use them, but they're very, very difficult to kill. And basically what you need is just a catastrophically bad defense roll from your opponent in the early game, and then you might just have a shot of taking them down. But apart from that, you don't have a hope. And if they're not damaged by turn 2, by the end of turn 2 into turn 3, it's probably not worth bothering unless you've got a big threat like a Vader or an Anakin really going for them. Then maybe they just about might drag them down in time. Yeah, I've talked about these guys a lot. Don't think I need to say any more. For me, the Gar version's slightly better, but that's very subjective. The Rebel one has better objective play. The Gar one has better damage. Up to you as to which one you think is best. We do what we do. It's better on the Gar version, but still perfectly valid on the Rebel version. The ability to do 2 speed 3 moves, get a bunch of aims, and still shoot with tactical is obviously really strong. So that works well. And then obviously the combo, Rex's scouting party can go on this unit as well. All good stuff. They're really strong. Same as the Ewok skirmish last time. I don't feel like they need much explanation. I just think they are super strong. And there we go, that's the finished tier list for the ranged units. As I said, Bounty Hunter's in another video, but yeah, I think this is pretty fair, and I think you could obviously make small arguments for kind of some units up, some units down, but I think all the units are roughly where I think they should be. Really hoping for some kind of Wookiee buffs fairly soon, because starting to feel increasingly sad as they are as low as they are on the board, but you never know, they might get a little bit of a buff soon, but we shall have to wait and see. Cassian K2, I think, just a little bit expensive for what they do and not quite suited to this current version of the game. Gar Saxon just needs a bit of a points drop for me, down to 85, 80. I think that would feel really good. Same with Iden Versio. Rex, Cody, I think are in a really solid spot. Obviously, Rex more of a utility piece, but can offer some fairly decent damage. Cody just has that great vehicle synergy. Marquand, I'd love to see come down 10, 15 points just to make Tempest that bit better. I think Han's in a really good spot. Wouldn't change anything about Han. I think he's great right now. Sabine and Sunfac just really efficient for their points. Sabine obviously that bit tougher, Sunfac that bit more valuable at 55 points, but I think both of them can really offer something, and the fact they're both fast and can offer, they have decent 1-pips, things like that, they can offer those decent impact turns in kind of the mid game, feels really good. And then you got Bad Batch, who stick them in any list and they'll make it better. I think there are very, very, very few lists that don't want Bad Batch. And I think actually, most Rebel lists would really enjoy just dropping Bad Batch in to that operative slot. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, etc. And I will see you for the next one.